person who falls in love with the journey goes further than the person who falls in love with the destination.
You will almost sabotage yourself once you arrive so that you can keep striving to get back to that point.
You never know what rock bottom feels like until you're there. I was in the best shape of my life externally. Mentally, I was in the worst shape I've ever been in my mind. Felt like I was going to lose my career. That was the only thing that I had left. That's what led to me to sit in my car with my Glock 43X, my off-duty gun, thinking about whether or not I should eat it.
From sitting in his car, contemplating suicide, to then going viral because of his mindset coaching and content creation. We have today the former law enforcement officer who focuses now on fitness, inspiration, and faith work. He's doing big things in the community, working with young men who are struggling with life. Welcome back to Raw Success. DC, peace, my brother.
Thank you, True. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a
Pleasure's all mine. You know, I want to really thank you for your generosity. Ever since we met, how we got here is because you were at the gym working out. And obviously, as you can tell by his amazing physique, he knows what he's doing. I asked you a question about building mass and strength. And without hesitation, man, you just answered my question. And I see other people who flock around you at the gym, and you always have a smile on your face, always sharp, always dropping knowledge. So thank you. We appreciate you being here.
I appreciate that, honestly. And the fact that you reciprocate that same type of energy makes it that much easier. So I just want to say this power and knowledge, and above everything else, you know, living that life with abundance.
Yes.
You attract what you give out. And the fact that I feel as though we both believe in that philosophy is the reason why we are where we are right now.
Definitely. You know, with obesity being one of the issues in our society, tell us a little bit about your fitness journey and how you got here. Let's start with that.
Absolutely. So I would say it started my junior year in high school. You call me DC, but at the time, my other nickname, which hopefully doesn't exist anymore, was Double DC.
Oh, wow.
Because I had man boobs, and I was about 30 pounds heavier than I should be. So by the end of my junior year, I told myself that I was going to do something different, which was join the wrestling team. And the reason why I saw that as being like a difficult obstacle for me to accomplish is because my wrestling team at the time was ranked 8th in the state.
Wow.
So they took things very seriously when it comes to training and everything, you know, involved with the whole practices and whatnot. They had triples, morning runs. They had things where I knew, you know, my 17, 16-year-old self was definitely going to be something that pushes me to the next level. So I remember my first day in practice, it was extremely intimidating. It was the first time in my life I actually contemplated on quitting something that I started. But I knew I wasn't a quitter, and that's the only reason why I kept going. So people were doing round-offs, you know, rolling around, flips, all these things that I'm not used to doing. I'm not used to being on my back. I'm not used to anything outside of just being on my 2 feet. And that being said, I made it through that entire season and dropped 30 pounds. I went from like 185 all the way down to like 152.
Wow. And I tell you, as a martial artist myself, you know, I definitely know that the wrestling training is no joke. If you survive wrestling, I already know you're one of the toughest people around. You know, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the wrestlers always come in with a level of grit and toughness and also progress, I would say, faster and at a rate totally different than somebody just off the street with a white belt.
Appreciate that. And you said Jiu-Jitsu, have you been training or?
These days, I don't train as much as I would like to.
Okay.
I'm a blue belt. My main system is Muay Thai. That's how I first started with boxing, and then eventually I went into Muay Thai and got into the grappling aspect. Nice. Yeah, so that's how I got into martial arts. But I'm a big fan, read books and everything, so I'm definitely familiar with, you know, some of like the famous wrestlers and even some of the coaches. So in terms of, so that's when you were a junior, and how were you able to then carry your discipline and consistency as an adult? You know, a lot of people, you know, they talk about the highlight years when they were in high school and they were a football player, but you still carried on even as a young adult. How did you, you know, stay consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking me that. For me, the high school journey, going through football, wrestling, losing that weight initially, gave me that first glimpse of me knowing that I'm capable of doing whatever I put my mind to. So that set the foundation for myself.
So you're saying, don't lose your thought, please. wrestling was sort of not only the training ground for your body, but it was also the training ground for your mind.
Yeah.
Where you adopted some of your philosophies that you hold dear to this day.
100%.
Okay.
For sure. And over the years, my weights fluctuated. I would get in shape, then get out of shape, get in shape, get out of shape. But that was because I was so fixated on kind of a destination rather than falling in love with the journey. You know, a lot of people say, you know, the cliche quote, but there's meaning behind it in the sense of a person who falls in love with the journey goes further than the person who falls in love with the destination. So every single time I hit my goal, weight, or whatever I wanted to accomplish, I went back to my old ways because I was so restricted. I was so focused on the destination.
Right.
But the moment I changed my mindset into, all right, this is a journey, this is a lifestyle, and started treating it as such, it never left my atmosphere. It stayed always near and dear to me. And that didn't happen until roughly around right before COVID.
Oh, wow. So recently you stopped the yo-yo effect. And, you know, I'm definitely familiar with that because I'm an NLP practitioner coach, right? NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And one of our, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, teachings or philosophies that we embrace is that the subconscious mind tends to operate, one of the aspects of it tends to operate like a thermometer. So in our mind, when we have a certain goal, let's say, and whatever that goal is not always a number per se, but it can be a state, right? You will almost sabotage yourself so once you arrive so that you can keep striving to get back to that point. So it's just like a thermometer, right? When you turn on the heat, let's say it's 65 degrees, you turn it on 70. Once the heat gets to 70, it turns off, right? Yeah. So what you experienced is actually the thermometer effect, so to speak.
I love
but
that.
When you made it a lifestyle, now this is what I do. Not to say you don't look at the numbers and statistics, right? But you're just not focusing on just that. This is just a life. This is what you do because this is your life, right? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, 100%. I basically changed my relationship with it. So it's like, instead of, you know, striding towards the goal, like you said, this is life. Yeah. Now, this is what we do now. This is part of who we are. Rather than looking at it as a diet, looking at it as a lifestyle, it's the same thing. This is what they mean by, if you change the things you look at, then the things you look at end up changing. So I changed the way I approached my diet, what I was feeding, or how I was working myself day to day. I looked at it as like, I became that identity. That was who I am now. And now it won't leave me.
Right. Because now it's a part of who you are, not just a number to get to. Because you were probably, and don't let me put words in your mouth, by the way, probably still thinking like the fat boy, you know, respectfully.
No,
like the fat boy.
Call it for what it is.
Yeah, just trying to get there.
Yeah.
And now that you have that identity of who you are now, it's just who you are.
Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for young men, teenagers, even young boys, parents? I mean, give it to us all. What would you recommend? Let's start off with the parents. And then I want you to walk us through for young boys, because, you know, our audience is very broad.
Yeah.
So what suggestions do you have?
I kind of have like a blanket type of answer.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
That works with everybody?
Yeah, because I feel like, you know, they say the biggest downfall for human beings is we overcomplicate things. So if we simplify it down to kind of like an answer that everybody can relate to, is more so kind of like the philosophy that's in the book of Atomic Habits, doing that 1% change. My biggest downfall, the reason why I was so stuck in that yo-yo, is because I would wake up one day, I'm like, all right, I'm doing a keto diet. Or I wake up one day, all right, no carbs. Or I wake up one day, all right, now we're doing crazy amount of, you know, calisthenics and exercise. And overnight, it was a shock to my current environment. It was a shock to who I am. It wasn't sustainable because it happened overnight. But then eventually, at one point, I said, you know what, let me just, you know what, for this week, I'm going to start drinking more water. The following week, I'm going to start implementing morning cardio. The week after that, let me start doing intermittent fasting. You know, and then from there on, it became sustainable because I didn't pile everything on overnight. So my best response to you for a question like that is just take it slow, take it steady, but make sure every single step is towards that goal, that person you envision yourself to be. Because every decision we make today is a vote towards the person we want to be tomorrow. And you're only human, so you're not going to be perfect. But just like with any vote or any type of voting system, the only way you're going to get that person, you just need to be 51% right in all your decisions.
Wow.
Not saying to settle for that, but give yourself grace when you don't achieve that, because you're only human every single day. So if 5 out of the 7 days you're doing everything right, that's a win. That's a win week. If 5 out of the 7 decisions you make throughout that day, just narrowing it down, are in that realm of who you decide to be, you're winning.
Wow. And what was it about COVID? You know, you mentioned that during COVID, that's when you really, I guess, got serious. You know, what was it? What happened during that time? Why was that the spark?
Right before COVID, December of 2019, I had just graduated college.
Congratulations, my
Thank you.
What's your major, if you don't mind me asking?
I double majored in criminal justice and sociology.
Dope. Okay.
Appreciate that. And right from there, a month later, I landed my first job as a adolescent counselor at a youth shelter.
Oh, wow.
So I worked with kids that came from traumatic, backgrounds, households, run-ins with the law, you name it. These kids were just damaged, and it helped me understand patience. That being said, COVID hit in April. And then that same month when COVID dropped, I got it too. And I was down bad for about 3 weeks. And I lost my sense of smell, taste. It was the worst I've ever been sick in my life. I normally don't get sick. After that, I kind of just fell in this victim trap of, I almost lost my sense of smell and taste. I deserve to eat this food, that food, order from DoorDash, because I didn't experience even, the enjoyment of food for an entire 3 weeks. Right. So that for some reason, I justified me indulging in food for an entire 3 months after that. So the weight tacked on very, very quickly. So I was in the brink of getting back into my shape. Then COVID hit. I fell right off. Worst that I've ever probably been in my life. And going into August, gyms were still closed, but the gyms in Pennsylvania I heard opened up. I told myself, I don't want to live the way I live anymore. I got to make a decision. So I'm going to do the harder things, because when you do the harder things in life becomes easy. If you do the easier things in life becomes hard. So I told myself, I'm going to do the harder things to make my life easier.
I love that.
So what I started doing is about 4 to 5 times out of the week, roughly, maybe 3 to 5 times out of the week, I drove to Pennsylvania, which was 1 hour to Stroudsburg, to the Retro.
Wow.
I did every single week, about 3 to 5 times a week, and I drove to Pennsylvania and drove back. So the 2-hour round trip, and I would do a gym workout. First thing in the morning, I worked out fasted. So empty stomach, cardio, lift, get home, shower, go to work. Rinse and repeat about 3 to 5 times a week.
Wow.
Started getting the rhythm, started getting to the routine, started getting more into the physique that I wanted. On top of everything else, I did a 24-hour fast once a week on a Wednesday. Middle of the week, just water. That's it.
Talk about commitment.
And then September happened. Gyms opened up in Jersey. I told myself I was doing an hour commute. Now I could even have more of a longer, more intense workout and still do what I'm doing because it's now remote. So I was willing to make the sacrifices, burn the gas, whatever it needed to achieve the goal that I wanted. And then once that happened, the gyms opened up September 1st, 2020. Yeah. It was smooth sailing. Everything else was smooth. I was able to do whatever I needed to do. And another thing that happened was you had to wear masks in gyms, right? So that's how I adopted. Everybody see me from time to time.
Right. They know you from wearing the mask.
Elevation mask. So that was just a little bit of me being stubborn and trying to still abide by the rules. They told me I can't lift unless I get a mask. I said, bet. I'm going to order this elevation training mask. It's going to have this look of me having a mask. Right. So they can leave me alone, but I'm still elevating my lungs and working myself up even more. So I find an excuse given the circumstances and the problems that I had in front of me.
Wow, and that's funny because literally on Friday when I saw him at the gym, somebody asked him, "Yo, where's your mask?" Right?
Yeah, I remember.
That's fire. So, tell us a little bit about the work you did with the youth in the it was a shelter?
Yeah, youth shelter.
In the shelter. I work with the youth as well, and I'm curious just from, I'm an older man and I'm in my mid-40s. From your perspective as a younger man, what did you see was are the main issues that the youth are dealing with in this day and time?
I feel like the best way I can answer that question is a lot of them are a product of their environment.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to try to help an individual youth, and you remove them from their environment and you see the child for being a child for who they are. Right. But then if they end up back in that environment, they're going to fall back to their old ways.
And
it's go ahead.
I was about to say, that's real. Just not to cut you off, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
I always tell people, as someone who ran the streets myself, that my mother raised me right. She taught me everything. She led me on the right path. It was my environment. It wasn't lack of, another issue, I can tell you as someone in my mid-40s, and my perspective is the lack of masculine presence in the homes is one thing that I see is the issue. But anyway,
no,
so you were saying
100%, and you're right. That's another issue that was very much so prevalent.
Oh, you said that being a consistent thing?
Yes, a lot of these kids did not have a father figure in the household. Wow, and the mothers can only do so much with a growing boy. Yeah. There's no stern, there's no rock, there's no structure because of the male masculinity is not even present. That energy.
So
crucial.
What was your main, I'm pretty sure you've contributed a lot, right, to them. What would you say was the core message to the youth that you were working with?
I did my best to the ones that were willing to listen. A lot of them, you see this guys is paid to be here and spend time with me,
Yeah.
But I did my best to show, who I am in those moments. So what I think just my presence and my energy and my I guess you could say version of unconditional love kind of left a lasting impact on them, because a lot of these kids, they curse you up and down, they test your patience,
right?
But I'm still there giving them food. I'm not giving them no attitude, and I understand that it's coming out of a place of hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw them for who they were.
What I see just from my experience of working with the youth, that if you don't have a connection, you have nothing. Because they heard it all, and they don't care. They don't care about what you have to say. What they care about first is a connection, and they want to know, are you real? Yeah. So I definitely get that. So after that, what was the next step? Tell us a little bit about your, what led you to law enforcement.
So when I was younger in high school, I think it was my freshman year in high school. My sister, she's a year younger than me, so she was in 8th grade. She tried to take her own life. And law enforcement played a huge role as to why she's still alive today.
Wow.
So that left a lasting impact on me. But prior to that major critical incident in my life, I always saw law enforcement as superheroes. So I always, maybe because of, my own home environment wasn't perfect, and I guess I felt powerless, and I saw power in them. And I wanted not the power in like a negative connotation, but more so just being able to have that strong presence and kind of be that sign of hope for people that needed the most. So I saw them as like, little, people with capes driving around.
Yeah, understood.
And I always saw them from a positive light. Yeah, I've had my fair share of negative interactions with law enforcement, but I never let that skew my behavior and generalize that entire organization.
It's interesting because perspective is everything, because I seen law enforcement as my enemy, when I was young, not now. But I saw them as my enemies, and, so it's interesting that you saw them as superheroes, and I saw them as tyrants and my enemies.
But hey, it's the culture and the environment. It plays a huge role, like you said.
Exactly. And perspective is everything. And so you mentioned suicide and your sister, and I'm glad that she's alive, and I'm assuming doing well.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you also fell into that same possible outcome also, as far as like considering to commit suicide. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you're right. And what's crazy is that after that incident happened with my sister, I told myself I'll never fall into that dark spot, right? It's a dark place.
Yeah.
But it's easy to say that when you're not in it.
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of be like, I can't imagine a person to have these thoughts until you start having those thoughts yourself. You never know what rock bottom feels like until you're there. And that's the crazy part of life. When you get sideswiped and you end up in the pit, and you didn't realize that's what the pit feels like, and you got to fight like hell to get out. So that being said, I didn't have the best father figure growing up. He was there from a financial standpoint, roof over the head, got my higher level of education. Everything was great, but when it came to just the abusive part of it, it was there. Verbally abusive, physically abusive. Just it was like, if he's in the home, there's no peace. Peace was just not present.
Wow.
And I guess you hear about it all the time when kids kind of have that residual damage from being in a traumatic environment, overthinking, anxiety, things of that nature. It's them trying to constantly predict their parents' behaviors so that they can protect themselves. And I had to kind of learn that about myself and manage that, and realize it was a product of my own environment. That being said, May 9th of 2022, my father pulled a knife on me. Didn't have the best relationship with him. He pulled a knife on me through just a verbal argument and threatened to remove me off this earth without any hesitation. Law enforcement got involved. He got arrested, and a full restraining order was handed down on him. About a month after, my girlfriend, who I thought I was going to marry, I was with her for over 2 years, left. And that was the first time when I'm like, wow, I am by myself. That's the only girl I let in. I don't really deal with emotions. I don't really talk to emotions. She knew what was going on. And my coping mechanism when it comes to a tough time in my life was to grip onto things I can control, because I felt like everything else around me was falling apart. It was pure chaos. My father's situation, my emotions that were there that I didn't want to deal with, I kept running away from them and avoiding it. So I buried myself in work and working out. I was in the best shape of my life externally. Mentally, I was in the worst shape I've ever been in my mind. Wow. It and from the outside, it looked like I had it together. In my mind, it was World War III. And it was crazy to look back at it and realize that was the way I dealt with things, which was not dealing with them. And that's what led me to eventually, about a month or two later, when I was showing up to work late, getting written up, oversleeping, overworking myself, felt like I was going to lose my career. That was the only thing that I had left. And that's what led to me to sit in my car with my Glock 43X, my off-duty gun, thinking about whether or not I should eat it. Yeah, thinking about how appetizing it looked. And that's the loneliness that people don't really tell you about, because my law enforcement agency, they knew what I was dealing with, but the best thing they could do was, all right, you know, if you need somebody to talk to, go to this person here. If you need somebody to talk to, we have this counselor that's appointed from the department. You can go, you know, handle that. If you need therapy, go get it. But every time I tried to open up to somebody at work, it would always be like, now's not the time. You know, we understand what you're dealing with, but now's not the time. And every time I screwed up, they're like, we understand that, you know, you dealt with these circumstances, but like, you know, you're getting to the point where enough is enough. You know, when you're going to get your shit together. If excuse my French, I'm not a big fan of curse. Not saying you can't curse or nothing, but I'm trying to kind of, I guess, cleanse my language a little bit.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. Yeah, I get it.
So, yeah, that being said, that level of loneliness where, you know, even at work, nobody wanted to listen to me. They said they wanted to, but when I, you know, try to open up, they reminded me that, you know, that wasn't a time and place to do so. And when I got home, nobody called and checked on me. Not saying it was their job to, but you saw all the signs. You know, I was walking red flag. Before my incident with my father happened, I was showing up to work on time, ambitious, smiling, my energy, everything was there. Incident occurred back to back, my father's situation, my girl leaving me, and it was night and day. I could even hang on to anything.
Wow.
And not a single person thought, hey, let me just check on this dude and see, you know, what's going on. Maybe, how about we go somewhere and talk about it, you know?
Right.
I was on my own island. And that being said, later on that year, I went to church for the first time. And that was the first time I felt peace in my entire life. And there's a service that about a couple months ago, they talked about how if your spirit is craving the Holy Spirit, if your own spirit is craving the Holy Spirit, and you walk into a service or you walk into, you know, open up a Bible, you will find what you're looking for. If your spirit's craving it, it will be fed. And I was craving it more than ever when I walked into church September of 2022, and I haven't stopped going since. I've been going at least once a month. Wow. And you know, I think that service talked about how when you're by yourself and you're at that rock bottom and you feel like there's no one to lean on, that's actually God asking you to lean on Him. Wow. And that's crazy. That service was that, and I never bawled my eyes out more than I ever have in my entire life. And it's crazy how, you know, nothing's really a coincidence. Everything does happen for a reason. And that was the reason why I had to walk into that church that same day with the sermon of that message that resonated with every single thing I needed to hear.
Wow. You know, there's so much to unpack there. Yeah, you got so much to unpack. I want to first say that something that stood out to me is when I was growing up and I would see like somebody like you, you know, who financially being taken care of, who can afford college and all of this and that, I would automatically assume that your life is amazing. Your life is great. And not even knowing that behind closed doors, it's not. You're suffering. So, you know, what we see is not always what we think we see. Again, perception is everything. So I want to unpack it, right? I'm a parent, and being a parent doesn't come with a training manual, right? We know that, and hurt people. And that's not an excuse to hurt people. Because when you know better, you should do better, obviously. Your father's not here to defend himself, so we're not going to talk about him. Well, what I do want to ask you, I know you're not a parent yet, right? Take your time, my brother.
I will.
What would you do differently as a father? And as you're saying that, I'm learning. I'm a father myself. And also other fathers are listening. You know, that's part of our core audience. So tell us a little bit about what you would do differently as a father, you know, with your son or your daughter.
Of course. And I appreciate you asking that, because that's a question I always ask myself every single time I reflect, and every single time I look back at the past to learn the lesson from what I experienced personally, as well as look towards the future and how I want to better it. You know, so referencing that, I came across a quote or a perspective that talked about how I want to be the type of parent where my kid makes a mistake and their first thought isn't, I can't tell dad, he won't understand. I want their first thought to be, I need to tell dad because he'll know the answer to this. You know, I need to tell dad this because he'll know how to figure this out, rather than the fear prevailing and causing them to hide it. Because that's the world I lived in, where I feared my parents, and if I made a mistake, not only did I not want to let them down, but I knew I'd be scolded and be punished even more than my own self-punishment, me understanding the mistake that I did. So I want to be able to build a relationship with my kids where it's like, all right, they make a mistake, but they can run to me with it and understand that I'm going to be there. Not to coddle them, but to, all right, I see that you understand you made a mistake. Let's put our heads together and try to find a solution with this problem.
And how do you think, as a father, you can create that space and that environment where your children will come to you?
Leading by example.
And I know you're not a father, so this is all theoretical.
Yeah,
right?
theoretically.
But it's coming from a space, you know, I always tell people, and my father and I did not have the best relationship either, and he wasn't in my life, and we have a great relationship now. So he always bigs me up about the type of father that I am, and I'm not perfect, and I'm still learning, right? So I can say this publicly, that from his actions and lack of action, I learned from that. That was sort of like the catalyst of the type of father that I am. Like, okay, my father didn't do these things with me, and I felt the pain of that, so I'm going to make sure I do this, right? So so I understand that your answers are probably coming from that space, right?
And I just want to add, you said a pretty cool point in the sense of like you recognize what you didn't have, you're right, growing up. And they often say that our love language is what we were deprived as kids growing up. And that hit different because I reflect on my own love language. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense.
What is your love language?
Verbal affirmations is like number one.
That's mine.
Number one, and then physical touch.
Indeed. So how would you create that space now? You know, so I understand the concept, right? You want your children to be able to come to you with any issues or problems, right? And how would you foster that type of relationship? How would you create that?
Letting my kids know that they're heard and making them feel like they're heard. Because I didn't have a voice growing up.
There it is.
And that's the reason why every single time my emotions, I get that emotional stimulation where, you know, my emotions are heightened. I shut down. Because my emotions were never validated. I remember vividly multiple times my dad would say something coming down or, you know, make me cry, just verbally abusive as a kid right before I go to school. And then he would ask me, why you look like you lost your best friend? Knowing exactly what had transpired to cause me to be upset.
Right.
You know, kind of rubbing in my face like, oh, it's written on your face that you're upset. Why does it look like that? Yeah. And I couldn't say anything. I just had to sit there and sit in my emotions. I didn't have a voice.
I think a lot of mistakes that parents do is when their child tries to explain, and listen, I get it, especially like single parent mothers, like super stressed out, right? I definitely get it. When their child tries to explain something, shut up, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. And listen, again, I have children. Children lie. They manipulate, right? So
that's a fact.
You know, I definitely get it, but I think that there has to be a way where there's some type of
balance.
Right. I struggle with the word balance sometimes. You know, I don't believe in balance, but in some instances, balance does matter. Just strategically or conscious of how we're saying certain things, right? Because even if they are lying, even if they are manipulating, there's a root problem. There's something at the root of that, right? And just saying, shut up, I don't want to hear it, right? It's not going to solve that. So, and subconsciously, it can, right, reinforce that what they have to say doesn't matter. And they can become adults. They can be. Doesn't mean they can also go the opposite way, right? Become adults like super, you know, like I'm going to be heard, right? Because they didn't get, right? But it can just sort of put in their subconscious mind that what they say doesn't matter, which can translate to other things, right? You know, but, you know, we won't go down that rabbit hole, right? No, but that's cool. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I think that more parents, including myself, need to practice that. So when you were in the car and you have your Glock in your hands and you're thinking about taking your own life, what stopped you?
My mom and my sister.
They called you, or you thought?
No, I thought about them. I realized that given the circumstances with my father, who's the male role model that they really have? You know, that I'm the only one. That's a lot of pressure.
You matter.
Yeah, I do matter. And I whether it was, I don't know who put that thought into my head that told me that tomorrow was still worth it when I was thinking tomorrow might not be worth it. but they're the two people that constantly, whenever I hit rock bottom, they're the first two images that I think about that keep me going.
Wow. You know, it's interesting. One day when I was young, man, this had to be like the early 2000s. My mother found my gun, illegal gun, you know, young man running in the streets. And when she found my gun, she was like, you know, in Spanish, you know, my mother doesn't speak English very well, saying like, you know, like, son, what are you doing with this? And so I was straight up. I said, Mom, you know, the streets are rough out there. I got to protect myself. And she looked at me, and, you know, my mother and I didn't have the best relationship either. You know, I love her, and she did her best. And I know she definitely did her best, even though we don't have the best relationship. But she looked at me and she said, well, did you ever think about how I would feel if you died? You know, or how that would impact me, right? Something to that effect. And I was puzzled, and I thought. I said, no. And that was like a moment of clarity for me, sort of like that you had, like, wow. You know, because I sort of had the mentality, like, man, if I die, man, like, whatever. You know what I'm saying? What happens, I'm out here, you know. But it's when I really realized that, yo, like, no, like, you know, this, my life, I know it sounds super simple, and like the world is probably listening to this and thinking like, duh. But as you said, right, about when you're in that moment, you know, when you're living how I used to live, like, you know, that's your world. That's your worldview. And so we live, I don't want to say we live for other people, but because of other people, we live.
Yeah.
And we strive and want to be better.
And another point you kind of brought up in the sense of when we're in our world, I describe it like a jar, right? Like a level of self-awareness is like if you're in the jar and you take yourself out and read your own label, you start really being able to dissect yourself and realize your own worth. Top of everything else. But when you're stuck in the jar, you don't realize what your true value is. You're so stuck in your moment or circumstances.
Right.
And then you get really, really lost. But all you really got to do is take a step back, take yourself out, and start reading your own label. And that can mean a multitude of different things. When it comes to your value, your weaknesses, what you can strengthen. And that's what really is, you know, growth and self-development.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that's what I meant by moment of clarity. I had one of those moments where I got out the jar.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And looked at my own label like, oh, snap. Yeah. So I just want to say that I'm super happy and glad that you are here.
Appreciate that. Likewise.
Especially because I know the work that you're doing. And again, we go to the same gym. I see how people light up when you're around. And then to know that you're growing your tribe and you're going, you know, people, I mean, let's talk about it. As a matter of fact, perfect segue. I mean, you're going viral because of your message. And so many people would have been deprived, you know, on so many levels. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the butterfly effect, you know, and then you got to think about.
No, enlighten me with the butterfly effect, please.
Oh, okay. Butterfly effect. I'll keep it super simple. Yeah. That, you know, something that happens like right now. So the concept comes from the fact that when a butterfly flaps his wings, like the energy that it's manifesting from flapping his wings has an effect on the earth. Oh. Yeah. So things that we do, right?
I've heard it, but I never actually. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's like super simplified version.
Yeah, of course. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, I see the power in it.
Right. Like they say, like it can cause like a tidal wave. Super extreme, dramatic example of what it can do. But, you know, in terms of what I'm saying for you is like the butterfly effect, like that one incident of you. I mean, but it's all connected, right? So because you were picked on and then the things with your father and your girlfriend at the time and almost committing suicide, all of that like contributed to cultivating the person that you are today. And because of that, your level of thinking and words, which we're about to get into in terms of the mindset coaching and whatnot, is having an effect on people. Not only on the surface level, my brother, but you don't even know. You're impacting them in ways that they're not even aware of yet. You understand what I'm saying? Right. So that's what I mean by the butterfly effect. Like you don't even see the impact. Like it's not just about somebody watching your videos on social media. It's like what's happening behind the scenes and what that will do for the persons.
And you said something that I just remember. I came across this perspective, and I'll start off with a question. So my question to you is, do you think you need a diploma to be successful in this lifestyle?
No.
You don't? I believe you do need a diploma in order to be successful.
Okay.
By diploma, I don't mean, you know, an associate's degree and
I should have asked.
And things of that
I thought that's what you meant.
No, but I do, but
okay.
Different degrees. So, you know, you do need a diploma to be successful in this life. But when I say associate's degree, I'm not talking about associate's degree in accounting. I'm talking about associate's degree in abandonment. right? A bachelor's degree, not a bachelor's degree in biology, a bachelor's degree in brokenness, right? Master's degree, not a master's degree in math. I think you get the idea. Master's degree in misery and PhD in pain. And I came across this webinar that talked about it in that perspective, and that was powerful to me, because what you're saying exactly is kind of like through the tests that I'm going through, that I went through, that you described, is why I have the platform and the opportunity to tell my testimony.
Absolutely.
And to share my story and remind people that they aren't alone. And that's why I always tell people, if you resonate with my content, you're reminding me that I'm not alone, and I hope you feel the same.
Right. And the realness of it, because one thing that we take pride in Raw Success is not being fake gurus. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're in the trenches, and we would like to think, because, you know, we examine and observe our guests to, you know, that they too are official, you know? And so you are qualified because of your struggle, because of your pain. And so now, what brought you out of that pit? You know, you described it as being like in the pit.
Yeah.
You know, so you're here, boom, you didn't take your life. Great. We're all benefiting because of that. You know, super grateful for that. What led you towards now, you know what? I want to take my message and bring it to the world. You know, tell us a little bit about that. Well, first, excuse me, sorry.
Go ahead.
What is your message? If you can say, what's your message? If you can say it in like one sentence, what's your message? And then answer the question.
Yeah, no, my message would be my purpose. So my purpose would be leaving people better than how I found them.
I love it.
And like my journey, because a lot of people ask, you know, what's your purpose or what's your journey, right? For some reason, I found that as my purpose, and it resonates with my soul and my message. And my journey is to impact people in a positive way, but impact as many people as I possibly can in a positive way. That's the journey that I'm on. And the byproduct of that will be the financial success, the financial freedom, and all these things that come along with it. But that's not what I'm focused on. My focus on is delivering that message and reaching as many people as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And you know, pinnacles and things that I hit along the way, I won't even imagine what it might be. And that's not what I'm focused on.
Indeed. So when you got out of the pit, right? Walk us through that. You know, and I hope I'm not opening any.
Nah, we're good. If we open anything, I'll let you know. Hey, we can close that door.
Okay, perfect. So, you know, walk us through the process of, like, you know, okay, you decide not to take your own life. So you put the gun away, and I know you said you went to church eventually. Walk us through your evolution and transformation from that point of getting out of the pit.
So I months prior to that, I had already bought the camera that I have in my possession, and I was just doing light recording. Nothing was really clicking. I didn't really know, you know, what I wanted to do with that.
What sparked that thought? Because there was something behind that.
I was inspired by my ex. She was a photographer.
Okay. So
me coming across the fact that she takes pictures. I wasn't big on pictures. I like the whole video aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I always liked fitness. The influencers that I followed, I was inspired by them.
Okay.
And something about it just, you know, drew me towards it. I didn't know that I was ultimately going to be where I am now, but something
butterfly effect.
But yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Butterfly effect. So I bought the camera, didn't know what I was doing with it, but I was just kind of recording my workout stuff. Pull myself out of the pit. I look back and I realized, wow, it got dark real quick. And it reminds me of the perspective when they say it takes, you know, let's say months or years to build a beautiful house or a mansion, right? It takes a while, just the foundation and everything, but it takes seconds to burn it down. That's to show the fact that bad things happen really fast. And you don't realize that a simple spark could take down the entire house. In the same sense of when I ended up in that pit, I didn't know what the pit was, where it was, what it felt like. But when I was there, I knew, you know, after I got out, I looked back and I told myself I never want to get there. Chances are I probably will end up there, but now I know the proper tools, resources, and the foundation that I use to get myself out. I just got to do it again.
You know, it's interesting, right? Don't lose your thought.
Go ahead.
About the pit, right? I remember one time I was in a negative state myself, and I was ashamed of that because, you know, here the world knows me as a positive person, empowering person, you know, someone who's a little smart, right? Got a little bit of knowledge. And
wisdom.
Right. Thank you for that. And I remember my wife was like, yo, you sound depressed. You're depressed. And I was like, no, I'm not depressed. What are you talking about, right? And so I realized, though, getting up out of that, right? And I don't want to get into that because this is not about me. This is about you.
Hey, but you can share. If you want to share, I'm all ears, man.
Indeed.
Two-way street.
Getting out of that rut, so to speak, I realized, like, yo, I wasn't even aware that I was being negative, you know. So it's like it can consume you, and I wasn't nowhere where you were, right? but it can consume you to a point where you don't even know you're in the pit.
Yeah.
You know, until you get out and you're like, oh, snap.
But you said you were nowhere near where I was, but you could have been. Everybody is. But the thing is, you're only as hard as the hardest thing you went through in life. You know, and I realized the fact that I reached that point, but I have more tools to handle the same point, maybe something a little bit worse than that.
Yeah,
because just like when they say, when you hit a breakdown in your life, that leads to a breakthrough. So I was broken down more than I ever been. It was no different than a muscle. When you go to the gym, you break that down. What happens afterwards? You get stronger. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got close to pulling that trigger, but I didn't. But now I don't think, I can't predict the future. But if I get to another pit, I know exactly what's going to keep me grounded and keep me from those thoughts creeping in. And my sister and my mom.
And differently, what's different now from your pit back then, something that I had when my wife pointed out, you have me now. And, you know, we're friends.
True.
So I'm going to be in your life. So if I see any red flags or I see you acting a little different, I'm going to be like, yo, DC, what's good with you?
True.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, and that goes back to that. Like you felt alone. I dare to say you were alone. And the reason why I say I'm hesitant in saying you were, because I also know that a lot of times we perceive that we're alone and we're actually not. It's just, it seems that way. So I don't know if that's for you. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. Like, you know what I'm saying? But so you perceive like you were alone. And the truth is that I definitely am not alone. You know, like I have my wife, I have my children, and I have good, dope friends that call me out whenever I'm not acting like the best version of myself. Which is, you know, that's why I felt that when you said you were alone. I was like, yeah, man, if I didn't have my tribe, if I didn't have the people that I have around me, who knows where I would be. And in addition to that, I also have the tools to get me up out of that. So once I realized, I was like, oh, snap. You know, that's when all the books and the experiences and like, yo, I'm from the hood. Like, what I'm going through now, that's nothing compared to what I've been through. And then all of these things, the lights sort of seem to turn on, and then the masculine presence and energy and reframing. There's a concept in NLP called reframing, where you take something and you, like, for example, I like to use the example, if you have a child that's hyperactive, you know, parents will complain like, oh man, my child has too much energy, However, you put that same child in fitness, or you put him in martial arts, or, you know, anything, you know, like that, that he'll be killing it. So if you just reframe it, some things just have to be reframed. You understand what I'm saying? Yep. Oh, this is just a moment for me to practice patience. Yes. For me to cultivate patience, right? So you can reframe things. We have the power. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Which is what we've been talking about throughout the whole conversation. So that's great. Now, tell us about the moment you went viral. How does that feel like?
It was rewarding, you know, because I'm posting videos trying to figure out what my niche is, who am I, and I'm trying to remember which was the first video. It was a heartbreak video. A lot of my videos are quotes, right? Whether it's a quote I'm inspired by somewhere else, or a quote that I think of myself, and this quote in particular that went like semi-viral, maybe like 500,000. It was it said when you left, you placed a bet against my future, and that's okay. Just because you didn't see the greatness in me doesn't mean that I wasn't destined for it. But wait till you find out just how much you lost on that bet. And that came from like the soul. I was sitting there, I stared at the camera in my basement, and I asked myself, what do I want to let her know? Because she walked away from me a month after my dad's situations happened. I don't blame her. I blamed her for a really long time. You know, I played victim, and she gave up on me, and I'm sitting in my sorrow, in my pit. But a point of my healing process started, and I was grateful for her. Because had she not left, I would not have discovered things about myself that I discovered today. That's what they mean by people can take you places within yourself that you can't go by yourself. My dad had to pull a knife on me. You know what I'm saying? My girl had to leave me. I had to sit in that car by myself with that gun. I had to be in those positions for me to discover who I am today. I know myself more than ever, and I know that I'm imperfect. I'm perfectly imperfect the way that I am. I know, you know, I'll rarely have these moments, but I have moments where I'll pop off on people, or I shut down, and I recognize, I'm going back to my old coping mechanism, which is avoidant. I want to avoid things. I want to shut down. I don't want to talk about it. But then how do I channel it? Because before I didn't know the source of it, but now I do. A lot of it is from my childhood. I reference back to it. I'm like, yep, it's because, you know, my feelings were invalidated and all those things. But now I understand myself more. And when it happens, I'm like, all right, I got to do the harder things in order for me to have an easier life.
I love that. I love that. Just facing yourself.
Yeah. Because you are, and in the Bible, it says you got to love your enemies. But we often forget that we are our own worst enemy.
So, because I know you didn't necessarily, I mean, everybody wants to do their best, but you didn't plan to go viral, really, right?
No, it's so, I mean, everybody, when you post, you think, oh, it'd be great. I didn't think I had what it took to be viral is the term, but to be that relatable, that's what it is at the end of the day. Can you relate to these people? Because the only way you'll be able to go viral, unless you're funny or entertaining, but the niche that I was in was just being relatable and putting something out there that people can be like, yeah, I felt that, right? And the fact that I put something out there and it caught wind, I'm like, yo, I'm not the only person that went through it. And then going back to your original question, what was that enlightenment? Was like, all right, I look back at how I was in the pit, and I told myself I couldn't be the only one that experienced what I experienced and felt what I felt. I can't be the only one that felt like they were alone. So let me create this content that reminds people that, guess what? You are not alone.
Wow.
And that's like me kind of putting a message out and putting things out that I wish I heard myself. Wow. So like every single piece of content, or not every single, but a majority of my content that really have gone viral is more so, pieces of who I once was in that pit. That it's kind of like letting people know, hey, if you're in that pit, just so you know, you're not alone. And I get countless messages, people letting me know, hey, I appreciate what you put out there, because I really needed that. And I always tell them every single time, no, I appreciate you relating to it, because it reminds me I'm not alone. And I'm just hope you feel the same, because you are not alone.
I really appreciate you as a warrior, because not only did you get yourself out of the pit, but you are committed to getting others out of the pit. And that's amazing work, and salute. As we start to wrap things up, I have a few more questions for you.
Go ahead.
What is your favorite, actually, before we get there, for anybody struggling with suicidal thoughts, depression, I want to say weight loss, but who's not struggling with weight loss? Forget the weight loss thing. What I want you to tell them, like, what words do you have for them?
I guess the first thing I could think of, or I just want to say, is like, to anybody struggling, not to disregard a certain population of the group, but I want to focus on the population of the group that need to hear it the most, which is men. Because out of the total suicide rate, men make up 80%. Wow. So that being said, like, my message to men, because of how the climate of society is, my message I always say to everybody that's in my community or that resonate with my content that are men themselves, I tell them it's okay to not be okay and still be a man. Because oftentimes we feel like we're not okay, and we also feel like our masculinity is slipping away from us. So it's just more so letting men know you have a voice, your voice matters. And if the person next to you is not willing to hear, if you come across me, just so you know, I always slow down for people that I can. And you always see me be intentional when I'm around people, because that's what I wish I had myself. So my message all in all is it's okay to not be okay and still be a man.
How can they find you?
Instagram, Piece of Deace. And the reason why it's PEACEOFDEACE. It's a double entendre, so it has two meanings, which is a piece of myself that I'm sharing with everybody.
Wow.
But also the piece within myself that I'm allowing you to see that I'm sharing with you.
I love
that. And then the course or the community is called Pieces to Peace, because oftentimes after a critical incident, a traumatic incident, heartbreak, whatever you want to insert in there, we often feel like we're left in shambles, essentially in pieces. And the healing journey to get to being yourself again is you taking those pieces and putting it back together so that you can ultimately have that level of peace you once had prior, if not better. So that's my journey that I'm sharing with everybody in this community, in these communities that I'm building. It's called Pieces to Peace, which is also the brand name. I'm going to have shirts and things made eventually, but that's what it is, which is essentially your journey of you ultimately getting peace again from the point that you feel broken and you're just putting yourself back together.
I love that. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book?
Well, do you read? I should ask that.
I just started reading last year.
Okay.
And I got through like 5 books and then I stagnated. And so I got to get back on it. So I appreciate you. Call me out, please.
Yeah.
I read it. I got back on it. I just started, reading. I fell off, but I have like literally a bunch of books already purchased on my nightstand.
I love
that I want to get into.
Well, and I want to hear what's your favorite books, even though you just started reading. But there's been people online. So I come from, obviously I'm older than you, right? So I grew up without social media. I grew up without YouTube. So the way that we got knowledge or wisdom is from attending events, like literally people speaking. You had to go there. Like I remember taking trains and buses just to go hear somebody speak.
Now you got webinars.
Right, exactly. DVDs. People would drop like DVDs, books, and audio programs like cassettes and CDs. I know that's crazy. I sound like a dinosaur.
No.
But so I came up under the culture that's, especially, when you don't have it around you. So, however, I bring that up to say that I have been running into people who are successful, who don't read. And I had to sort of get rid of my my negative view on people who don't read. If people didn't read, I would put them in a box like, yo, you know what I'm saying? That's crazy. But I realized there's a lot of people I know who are very well read, who ain't about nothing. And you know what I'm saying? True. So they read many books and they ain't doing nothing. So I no longer judge somebody who says they don't read. I judge somebody by the actions that they're taking.
It's about character.
Indeed, all day, right? So, but you do read.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite book and why?
There's two books that had a huge impact on me that I read either last year or the year before. The first one was, what's the name of it? A Liberated Mind. I forgot the author of it. Phil something. A Liberated Mind, it was like a very academic type of book. So the first half of it, the author is talking about his battle with crippling anxiety, which I didn't even know existed. He had levels of anxiety that caused him to be paralyzed, and how he battled through it, his coping mechanisms, his story, phenomenal. The second half of the book is essentially you going through a like psychology class, exercises, things that you can implement yourself to kind of get yourself grounded, present, kind of mindfulness exercises, therapeutic exercises, meditation, all these things that you can kind of use to understand yourself more and help you through times where you might be battling anxiety or depression or just things that take you out of the moment. So things to aid you bring yourself back into the present. Second most impactful or powerful book was Verbal Judo. That came across my radar because I worked in law enforcement. So that's a big law enforcement type of book to kind of help with your communication skills so you can de-escalate conversations, people, interactions. It helped me. I wish I read it before my relationship fell through, because honestly it helped. Even in the book, the author talks about how it helps save marriages, because it helps you with tools to help people feel like they're heard, and that you can also articulate what you heard them say by saying it back to them, so they actually listen to you even more, because a lot of people like to hear themselves talk. So if you say, hey, did you say this, or what I'm hearing you say is, and then you insert a paraphrase version of what they said, they're more likely to kind of hear you, and then you can add in your thoughts at the end, because you already grabbed their attention. And those are the two major books that really left a huge impact on me.
I love that. Now, not to make the conversation grim all of a sudden, right?
Go ahead, grim it up.
But
they say if it bleeds, it reads in the news industry.
Word. Fast forward, you're 150 years old, and someone is reading at your eulogy. In one sentence, what would you like them to say?
Damn. I think it would definitely have to be something along the lines of the theme of the fact that them knowing my existence left them better than them prior to knowing that I existed.
Which is your purpose.
Which is my purpose. So if anything, a message at my eulogy that reinforces my purpose would give me peace.
I love it. Thank you for joining Raw Success. Thank you for coming by. We appreciate you. I know you're a busy man doing big things.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I feel blessed to just be part of this beautiful journey.
Let's get it.